Queen Sereth pressed her massive scaled head against the crystal floor and listened to her children breathe. 3 days had passed since the twins last ate anything. Their small chests rose and fell in shallow movements that made her ancient heart crack with fear. The royal physicians stood in clusters around the nursery, whispering theories that meant nothing. One suggested the meat was cut wrong. Another blamed the temperature of the feeding chamber. A third physician, whose scales had turned gray with age, simply shook his head and said some hatchlings chose to fade away. Sereth wanted to roast them all with fire. Her twins, Kiva and Ryan, huddled together in the corner beneath a shelf of golden coins. Their eyes tracked the adults moving around the room, but when anyone approached with food, both hatchlings turned their heads away with identical stubborn expressions. At 6 months old, they already knew how to say no. The palace nutritionist tried again, holding out a plate of minced Krellin meat mixed with bone powder and mineral supplements. The smell should have driven any young dragon wild with hunger. Kiva sniffed it once and sneezed. Ryan did not even look. "Your Majesty, perhaps if we changed the presentation," the nutritionist began. "Get out." Sereth's voice came out as a low rumble that shook dust from the ceiling. "All of you, leave me with my children." The physicians and advisors scattered like insects. The heavy doors sealed behind them with a boom that echoed through the chamber. Sereth was alone with the two most precious beings in her 800 years of existence, and she had no idea how to save them. She shifted into her smaller form, the one she used for delicate council work, and crawled across the floor to where her babies waited. They chirped softly when she got close, a sound that meant comfort but not hunger. She wrapped her wings around them both and felt how light they had become. "Please eat," she whispered in the ancient dragon tongue. "Please, my loves, just a little." Kiva nuzzled against her neck. Ryan made a purring sound. Neither reached for food. Outside the nursery, life in the palace continued without pause. Sereth could hear the clang of armor as guards changed shifts, the hum of cleaning machines moving through corridors, the distant roar of dragons taking flight from the landing platforms. The Draconite Empire did not stop turning because 2 hatchlings refused their dinner. But Sereth's world had stopped completely. She thought about her own mother, dead now for 3 centuries. What would the old queen have done? Force the food down their throats? Let them learn hunger through suffering? Dragon child-rearing philosophy was simple and harsh. The strong survived. The weak did not. Coddling only created soft adults who could not lead. Yet when Sereth looked at her children's tired eyes, she could not imagine letting them suffer for a lesson. A soft knock on the outer door made her lift her head. She had ordered everyone away. Who would dare disturb her now? "I said no interruptions," she called out. "Sorry, Your Majesty." The voice came from the hallway, muffled by thick crystal. "I'm just a night cleaning crew. I can come back later." A human voice. Sereth almost told him to go away, but something in his tone carried a gentleness that felt different from the nervous physicians. She rose and moved to the door, opening it just enough to see who stood outside. A human male in a gray maintenance uniform held a cleaning cart stacked with supplies. He was older for his species, with silver hair and lines around his eyes that came from smiling often. His name badge read Dennis Hayes. "I'm sorry," Dennis said again, taking a step back. "I heard about the little ones. Everyone in the palace is talking about it. I just want to say I hope they get better soon." Sereth stared at him. Humans were common enough in the palace, doing work that dragons considered beneath their status. Cleaning, cooking, basic repairs. She had never paid much attention to them beyond ensuring they did their jobs properly. This one seemed different, though. His eyes held genuine concern instead of fear. "They will not eat," she heard herself say. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Nothing I do makes any difference." Dennis set down his cart and moved a little closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "How old are they?" 6 months. "And before this? Were they eating fine?" Sereth nodded. "They love their meals, always fighting over the best pieces." Then 3 days ago, they both stopped at the same time. The physicians say there is no illness, no injury. They simply refuse. Dennis rubbed his chin, thinking, "I had 4 kids back on Earth. Raised them by myself after my wife passed. My youngest daughter did the exact same thing when she was about 2. Drove me crazy for a week. What did you do? Sareth asked, and she did not care that she was taking advice from a human janitor while her entire royal council waited outside. I stopped making it a fight, Dennis said. Kids are smart. They figure out real quick that refusing food gets them attention and control, makes them feel powerful. So I turned it into something fun instead of something they had to do. Sareth felt a spark of something she had not felt in 3 days. Hope. Show me, she said, opening the door wider. Dennis Hayes picked up his cart and walked into the royal nursery to meet 2 dragon hatchlings who desperately needed someone to understand them. End of part 1. Dennis set his cleaning cart beside the entrance and took his first real look at the royal nursery. The chamber was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth, with walls of pink crystal that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the floor. Piles of gold coins sat in corners like ordinary furniture. Ancient weapons hung on display racks. This was wealth beyond anything he had ever imagined, but his attention fixed on the 2 small dragons huddled under a shelf in the far corner. They were beautiful. Their scales shifted between deep blue and purple depending on how the light hit them. Each was about the size of a large dog, with wings folded tight against their sides and tails wrapped around their feet. Their eyes were bright and aware, tracking his every movement with sharp intelligence. Hello there, Dennis said softly, kneeling down several feet away. He knew better than to rush towards scared children, even dragon children. My name is Dennis. I'm here to help if you'll let me. Kiva, the slightly larger twin, tilted her head and made a small chirping sound. Ryan stayed silent, but his tail twitched with curiosity. Queen Sareth moved to stand beside them, her massive form somehow gentle as she settled near her babies. They have not made sounds like that since they stopped eating, she said quietly. Dennis smiled. They're interested. That's a good sign. He turned his attention back to the twins. You two have everyone pretty worried, you know? But I get it. Sometimes eating is boring. Same food every day, everyone standing around watching you, telling you what to do. That's no fun at all. Fun. Sareth repeated the word like it was foreign to her. Kids need fun, Dennis explained. They need to play and explore and make choices. Even little ones. Especially little ones. He studied the twins carefully. I'm guessing these 2 are pretty smart. Smart enough to figure out that refusing food makes all the adults panic and pay attention. Sareth's eyes widened. You think they're manipulating us? Not in a mean way, Dennis said. They're just learning how the world works. They push a button and everyone reacts. That's normal kid behavior across every species I've ever heard of. He looked at the plate of untouched meat sitting nearby. But we can work with that. We just need to make eating more interesting than not eating. Queen Sareth looked doubtful, but desperate enough to listen. Ow! Dennis stood and walked back to his cleaning cart. He pulled out a few items he used during his shifts. A handful of colored cleaning cloths. A small bell he kept for signaling other workers. A rubber ball he bounced against walls when the night shifts got boring. Do you have any small containers? He asked. And maybe something that makes noise? Within minutes, palace staff brought him metal bowls, wooden blocks, and a set of chimes from the music room. Dennis spread everything across the floor and began setting up a simple path from one side of the nursery to the other. He placed a cloth at the first station, a bell at the second, the ball at the third. The twins watched with growing interest, their heads lifting slightly. Now, Dennis said, taking small pieces of the prepared meat and placing one tiny portion at each station. We're going to play a game. It's called the Adventure Trail. He demonstrated by walking to the first station himself. He rang the bell, made an exaggerated happy face, and pretended to eat something delicious. Then he moved to the next station, bounced the ball twice, and repeated the performance. Kiva's tail unwrapped slightly. Ryan leaned forward. Your turn, Dennis said, stepping back and gesturing toward the course. First one to complete the trail wins. For a long moment, nothing happened. Queen Sareth held her breath. Dennis waited patiently, knowing that pushing now would ruin everything. Then Kiva stood up. She moved slowly, cautiously, toward the first station. Her eyes stayed locked on Dennis, checking to see if this was a trick. When she reached the colored cloth, she sniffed it carefully. The small piece of meat sat beside it, still warm and fresh. "Ring the bell," Dennis encouraged gently. "That's the rule of the game." Kiva looked at the bell. She looked at Dennis. Then she reached out with one small claw and tapped it. The sound chimed through the nursery. "Perfect." Dennis clapped his hands together. "Now you can take your prize." Kiva hesitated, then quickly ate the small piece of meat. It was gone in one bite. She made a surprised sound, as if she had forgotten that food could taste good. Ryan could not stand being left behind. He scrambled to his feet and rushed to the second station, pushing past his sister. He grabbed the ball with both front claws and accidentally flung it across the room. It bounced off a pile of coins with a loud clatter. Both twins froze, waiting to be scolded. Dennis laughed instead. "That works too. Great throw, Ryan. Now, take your prize." Ryan gobbled his piece of meat and immediately looked for the next station. For the first time in 3 days, Queen Sereth watched her children eat willingly. Tears formed in her massive eyes as Kiva and Ryan completed the trail, ringing bells and moving objects and chirping with excitement. They were playing, they were happy, and they were eating. When both twins finished the course, they ran back to the beginning and looked at Dennis expectantly, clearly wanting to do it again. Dennis glanced at Queen Sereth. "Should we set up a longer course?" She could barely speak around the relief flooding through her. "Yes, yes, please." Into part 2. Word spread through the palace faster than fire through dry grass. The human janitor had gotten the royal twins to eat. Within hours, half the court found excuses to walk past the nursery. They pressed their faces against the crystal walls and watched Dennis create increasingly complex games while Kiva and Ryan ate small portions at every station. To be by the end of the first week, the twins were back to eating normal amounts. Their energy returned. Their scales grew brighter. They wrestled with each other between games and chirped happy sounds that echoed through the royal halls. Dennis came every evening after his cleaning shift ended. He never asked for payment or special treatment. He simply showed up with new ideas and infinite patience. One night, he created a treasure hunt. He hid pieces of food around the nursery with small clues written in pictures that the twins could understand. Kiva solved puzzles by studying them carefully. Ryan preferred to knock things over until he found what he wanted. Both methods worked. Another night, Dennis brought an old picture book from Earth and made up stories about brave dragons going on adventures. He placed snacks at different points in the story. When the hero dragon in the tale found food, the twins got to eat a bite themselves. They listened so intently that they forgot to be stubborn. Queen Sereth attended every session. She took notes on soft leather scrolls, writing down Dennis's techniques in careful script. She asked questions constantly. How did he know when to push and when to wait? Why did games work better than commands? What made children want to cooperate? Dennis answered everything honestly. Kids just want to feel like they matter, like they have some control over their lives. When you force them to do something, they fight back because it's the only power they have. But when you make it their choice, when you make it fun, they choose to cooperate because it feels good. Dragon culture does not teach this, Sereth admitted one evening. They sat together while the twins napped after a particularly energetic game of hide and seek. We believe hatchlings must learn discipline and strength above all else. Softness creates weakness. Dennis cleaned up the scattered toys and food bowls. I've seen your people, your majesty. You're plenty strong. But strength doesn't have to mean being hard all the time. My wife used to say that the strongest thing a parent can do is be gentle with their kids. Sereth was quiet for a long time. Tell me about your wife, she said finally. So Dennis did. He told her about Rachel, who died of illness when their youngest was only 3. He talked about the hard years that followed, raising 4 human children alone while working multiple jobs to keep them fed. He spoke about the mistakes he made and the lessons he learned. My oldest son didn't talk to me for 2 years because I pushed him too hard, Dennis said. I thought I was making him strong, teaching him to be tough. Instead, I just made him angry and scared. It took me a long time to understand that listening matters more than lecturing. You are a good father, Sereth said softly. I try to be, Dennis replied. That's all any parent can do. Try our best and fix our mistakes when we make them. The twins woke from their nap and immediately scrambled over to Dennis, climbing onto his lap like he was a piece of furniture. They had grown comfortable with him in a way they were not with anyone else except their mother. Dennis scratched behind their ear ridges, and they purred like giant cats. One of the royal physicians entered the nursery, carrying a data pad. He bowed to Queen Sereth and tried to ignore Dennis entirely. "Your Majesty, I have completed my analysis of the human's methods. I believe I can replicate his techniques through a structured feeding protocol that our staff can implement." Sereth looked at her children cuddled against Dennis. She saw how relaxed they were, how happy. "Can you make them laugh?" she asked the physician. "Excuse me, can you make my children laugh the way Dennis does?" The physician's scales flushed with embarrassment. "I am a medical professional, not an entertainer." "Then you cannot replicate what Dennis does," Sarah said firmly. "This is not about protocol or structure. It is about connection." The physician left looking offended. Dennis pretended he had not heard the conversation, but Queen Sereth saw the small smile on his face. As the days passed, other changes began to show. The twins started learning words in both dragon tongue and human English. They picked up phrases from Dennis and used them with palace staff, who were shocked to hear royal hatchlings speaking a human language. Kiva became bold and adventurous, always wanting to try new games and explore new parts of the nursery. Ryan grew more thoughtful, often watching his sister test things first before deciding if he wanted to join. Their personalities bloomed like flowers in spring. Dennis taught Queen Sereth all the games so she could continue them when he was not there. She was a surprisingly quick learner, though she struggled with making the silly voices that Dennis used so naturally. The twins thought it was hilarious when their dignified mother tried to sound like a space pirate or a grumpy merchant. The palace felt different now. Lighter somehow. Guards smiled when the twins chirped greetings in the hallways. Kitchen staff saved special treats for the games. Even the stiffest advisors softened slightly when they saw how healthy and happy the royal children had become. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. In the shadows of the Grand Council chamber, old dragons gathered and spoke in angry whispers about traditions being broken and humans overstepping their place. Storm clouds were gathering, and Dennis Hayes had no idea that his simple kindness was about to shake the foundations of an empire. End of part 3. The summons came on a cold morning when frost covered the crystal towers. A palace messenger found Dennis in the lower maintenance tunnels, replacing burnout light panels. The message was brief and formal. The High Council requested his presence in the Grand Chamber at noon. Dennis had never been to the Grand Chamber. Regular workers did not go there. It was a place for nobles and important decisions, built from black stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Just looking at the building from outside made him nervous. He cleaned up quickly and changed into his least worn uniform. His hands shook slightly as he walked through the palace corridors. Other human workers gave him worried looks. Everyone had heard about the council meeting. Everyone knew what it meant. The Grand Chamber was exactly as intimidating as he had imagined. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into shadow. Rows of stone seats curve in a half circle, each one occupied by a dragon noble. Their scales ranged from deep crimson to silver white, and their eyes tracked Dennis like predators watching prey. Queen Sereth sat in the central seat, her expression carefully neutral. The twins were not present, likely kept away from whatever was about to happen. At the front of the chamber stood an ancient dragon whose scales had turned almost black with age. Council leader Vorthen was legendary, even among his own people. He had lived for over 1,000 years and led the council since before humans even reached space travel. Dennis Hayes, Vorthen's voice rolled like thunder. You stand before this council to answer questions regarding your interaction with the royal heirs. Dennis walked to the center of the chamber floor and tried to keep his voice steady. Yes, sir. You are aware that royal hatchlings are traditionally raised by trained professionals with centuries of experience. I am now, sir. Yet you presume to interfere with their care despite having no credentials, no training, and no permission from this council. Dennis glanced at Queen Sereth, but her face remained unreadable. He was on his own here. I didn't mean to interfere, sir. I just wanted to help. The twins were sick and I thought maybe I could do something. And what expertise do you claim that our royal physicians lack? Another council member spoke, her voice dripping with contempt. What knowledge does a human cleaning worker possess that we do not? None, ma'am, Dennis said honestly. I'm not smarter than your physicians. I just know kids. I raised 4 of them by myself. Kids are kids, no matter what species they are. They need to play and feel important and have some control over their world. Vorthen leaned forward. You believe dragon hatchlings are the same as human children? In some ways, yes, sir. Maybe not in everything, but in the important stuff. They feel scared and lonely and stubborn. They want attention and love and someone who listens to them. That's universal. The chamber erupted in angry muttering. Several council members hissed their disapproval. One shouted that it was an insult to compare their superior species to primitive humans. Silence, Vorthen commanded, and the noise stopped instantly. He studied Dennis with eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. Your methods have shown results. The royal heirs are healthy again, but you have created a dangerous precedent. Already, other dragon parents in the palace speak of copying your games. Some have begun treating their hatchlings with what they call gentleness. Is that bad? Dennis asked before he could stop himself. It is weak, Vorthen said flatly. The Draconite Empire was built on strength and discipline. Coddling children creates soft adults who cannot lead or fight or make hard decisions. Your human methods may work for your fragile species, but they will destroy ours. Dennis felt anger rise in his chest. He thought about his own children, all grown now and living good lives. He thought about Kiva and Ryan, so happy and bright when they played. He thought about Queen Sereth learning to make silly voices for her babies. With respect, sir, I disagree, he said. Being kind to kids doesn't make them weak. It makes them confident. Kids who feel loved and heard grow up to be strong adults who can love and hear others. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. The chamber went completely silent. No one spoke to council leader Vorthen that way. But before Vorthen could respond, Queen Sereth stood. Her movement made every dragon in the room turn to face her. I have listened to this council debate my children's care for weeks, she said, her voice carrying power that shook the stone walls. I have followed your advice and traditions. My twins nearly died because of it. Your Majesty, Vorthen began, but she cut him off. Dennis Hayes saved my children when no one else could. Not with ancient wisdom or political power, but with simple kindness and understanding. He asked for nothing in return. He expected no reward. He simply saw 2 babies who needed help, and he helped them. She moved down from her seat to stand beside Dennis. The gesture made several council members gasp. A queen did not stand equal with a common worker. I propose that we grant Dennis the official title of Royal Children's Companion, Sereth continued. He will help raise and educate my heirs, teaching them about human culture and different perspectives. This council will vote on the matter now. Vorthen's eyes narrowed. And if we vote no, Queen Sereth's scales began to glow with inner heat, a sign of barely controlled fire. Then I will remind this council that while you advise, I rule. My children, my choice. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Vorthen could challenge her, could push for a power struggle that would tear the court apart. Or he could accept a small defeat now and plan for later. He raised his claw, all in favor of allowing the human to continue. The vote was close. Some dragons voted yes because they respected the queen. Others voted no out of tradition and pride. When the count finished, Sereth's faction had won by just 3 votes. Dennis Hayes was now officially part of the royal household. But as he left the chamber with Queen Sereth, he saw the look in Vorthen's eyes and knew this fight was far from over. And to part 4. The weeks following the council vote were tense. Dennis continued his evening sessions with the twins, but now guards watched everything he did. Palace staff who had been friendly before became distant and cold. Someone spread a rumor that he was teaching the royal heirs to be soft and useless. The twins noticed the change in atmosphere. They asked Dennis why some dragons looked angry when they saw him in the hallways. He tried to explain in simple terms that not everyone agreed with new ideas, and that was okay. People needed time to understand things that were different. Kiva, always protective, started hissing at dragons who glared at Dennis. Ryan became quieter, more watchful, sensing danger even if he could not name it. Queen Sereth grew more protective as well. She assigned loyal guards to watch over Dennis during his travels through the palace. She made it clear to her court that anyone who harmed or threatened the royal children's companion would face her personal wrath, but she could not be everywhere at once. Dennis was leaving the nursery one evening when 3 dragon nobles cornered him in a side corridor. They were younger than Vorthen, but just as traditional, wearing formal robes that marked them as military advisors. "Human," the largest one said, his voice a low growl. "You have overstayed your welcome in this palace." Dennis backed against the wall, very aware that any one of these dragons could kill him with a single swipe of their claws. "I'm just doing what the queen asked me to do." "The queen is blinded by maternal weakness," another dragon hissed. "She cannot see that you are poisoning the royal line with your soft human philosophies." "I'm teaching 2 kids how to eat and play," Dennis said, try to keep his voice calm. "That's all. I'm not trying to change your whole society." "But you are," the third dragon stepped closer. "Already, other families mimic your methods. Parents play games with their hatchlings instead of teaching proper discipline. The next generation will be weak because of you." They advanced on him slowly. Dennis had nowhere to run. He thought about his own children back on Earth, wondered if he would ever see them again. Then a roar shook the entire corridor. Queen Sereth appeared at the far end of the hallway, her body fully expanded to battle size. Fire leaked from between her teeth. Her eyes burned with rage that made the 3 nobles stumble backward in fear. "You dare threaten him under my roof." Her voice could have melted stone. "You dare touch someone under my personal protection?" The nobles dropped to their bellies immediately, pressing their faces to the floor. "Your Majesty, we meant no harm. We were simply expressing concern by cornering an unarmed human in a dark corridor." Sereth moved closer, her massive form blocking all light. "By threatening violence against the one who saved my children. Forgive us, Your Majesty." "Get out of my sight," Sereth commanded. "All 3 of you. And spread the word to anyone else who shares your views. Dennis Hayes is under my protection. Anyone who harms him answers to me personally." The nobles fled without looking back. Dennis leaned against the wall, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Sereth shifted back to her smaller form and placed a gentle claw on his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Just scared," Dennis admitted. "Thank you for coming. I should have anticipated this," Sereth said, anger still edging her words. Vorthen accepted the vote, but he did not accept defeat. He will continue to push against us through others. Dennis took a few deep breaths to steady himself. "Maybe I should leave. I don't want to cause problems for you or the twins." "Absolutely not," Sereth said firmly. "Running away would only prove them right. Besides, my children need you." As if summoned by their mother's words, Kiva and Ryan came rushing down the corridor, followed by their worried nursery attendant. They must have sensed something was wrong through whatever connection children have with their parents. The twins crashed into Dennis, wrapping their small bodies around his legs and chirping distress sounds. He knelt down and hugged them both, feeling their rapid heartbeats against his chest. "I'm okay," he told them softly. "I'm okay. Just a misunderstanding." But Kiva looked up at him with eyes far too knowing for a baby. She understood that someone had tried to hurt her friend. Her scales began to glow with the same inner heat her mother showed when angry. "Easy there," Dennis said, scratching behind her ears the way she liked. "Getting mad won't help. We solve problems with smart thinking, remember? Like in the games we play." Ryan made a questioning chirp, asking if Dennis would still come tomorrow. "Of course I'll come tomorrow," Dennis promised. "I'll come every day until you 2 are sick of me." That night, Queen Sereth called an emergency meeting of her most trusted advisors. She made it clear that Dennis was not just accepted, but valued. She promoted him officially, giving him rooms in the palace so he would not have to travel through dangerous corridors alone. She assigned guards to protect him around the clock. The message was clear. Dennis Hayes was not going anywhere. But making him officially important also made him an official target. Vorthin and his followers could not attack a random janitor without consequences. But now Dennis was part of palace politics. He was a piece on the game board, and in politics, pieces could be sacrificed. Dennis understood this better than anyone expected. He had not survived raising 4 kids alone by being stupid. He knew he was in danger. He knew that some dragons would never accept him. But when he looked at Kiva and Ryan, so happy and healthy and full of life, he knew he could not walk away. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible to win. Into part 5. 6 months after Dennis first walked into the royal nursery, the palace gardens hosted a celebration. Kiva and Ryan were turning 1 year old, and Queen Sareth had invited families from across the empire to attend. It was both a birthday party and a statement. Her children were thriving, and everyone could see the results. The twins had grown considerably. They were now the size of large ponies, with strong wings and bright scales that shimmered in the sunlight. They ran through the gardens playing tag with children of various species, including several young dragons whose parents had adopted Dennis's teaching methods. Dennis watched from a bench near the fountain, wearing formal clothes that still felt uncomfortable. He preferred his maintenance uniform, but Queen Sareth had insisted he dress appropriately for the occasion. His new title came with expectations he was still learning to navigate. A shadow fell across him. Council leader Vorthin sat down on the bench without asking permission. The old dragon's presence made nearby guards tense up, but he made no threatening moves. "They are strong," Vorthin said, watching the twins play. "I expected weakness from your methods. I was wrong." Dennis nearly fell off the bench in shock. Vorthin admitting error was something no one expected. They just needed someone to listen to them, Dennis said carefully. Vorthin was quiet for a long moment. "My own son died young. Refused food like the royal twins. I forced it down his throat because that was our way. He choked and did not survive." The ancient dragon's voice carried old pain. "I told myself it was his weakness. But watching your twins thrive makes me wonder if it was my stubbornness instead." Dennis did not know what to say. He settled on honesty. "I'm sorry about your son. It was 300 years ago," Vorthin said. "But some losses never fade." He stood slowly, his old bones creaking. "I still believe tradition matters. I still think dragons should be raised as dragons. But perhaps there is room for new traditions alongside old ones." It was not acceptance, but it was not hostility either. Dennis would take it. The celebration continued into the evening. The twins opened gifts from nobles and common workers alike. They received toys and books and strange foods from distant planets. But their favorite gift came from Dennis. A simple set of colored balls and bells, just like the ones they had used in their very first game. Kiva and Ryan immediately started setting up an obstacle course in the garden, recruiting other young dragons to play with them. Within minutes, a dozen children were running through stations, ringing bells, and laughing with pure joy. Parents watched in amazement. Some looked disapproving. Others looked thoughtful. One dragon mother approached Dennis shyly. "My daughter will not sleep through the night. She cries for hours. The physicians say there is nothing wrong with her. Do you have any games that might help?" Dennis smiled. "Maybe she's scared of the dark. Have you tried leaving a light on in her room? Or sitting with her until she falls asleep?" The mother looked surprised. "I was told that would make her dependent and weak. Or it might make her feel safe," Dennis suggested gently. "Sometimes kids just need to know someone is there." The mother thanked him and hurried away, probably to try the suggestion that very night. More parents came with questions. How do you get children to share toys? What do you do when they fight with each other? How do you teach them right from wrong without being harsh? Dennis answered each question patiently, sharing what he had learned from raising his own kids. He never claimed to have all the answers. He just shared what worked for him and encouraged parents to trust their own instincts. Queen Sareth watched from across the garden, pride evident in her expression. She had fought hard to keep Dennis here, and now even her critics had to admit the benefits. Young dragons across the palace were healthier and happier. Parents were less stressed. The entire atmosphere of the royal court had shifted towards something gentler. As night fell and guests began to leave, the twins finally wore themselves out. They collapsed in a pile near the fountain, still giggling about their games. Dennis sat down beside them, and they immediately curled up against him like he was a piece of furniture. "Tell us a story," Ryan requested in his small voice, speaking human English with barely an accent now. "Yeah, the one about the brave knight," Kiva added. So Dennis told them stories while the stars came out above the palace. He talked about heroes who won through kindness instead of violence, about problems solved with clever thinking, about people who were different learning to work together. Queen Sereth joined them, settling her massive form nearby. She listened to the stories too, sometimes adding dragon legends that matched the themes Dennis explored. Later, after the twins had been carried to bed by their attendants, Dennis and Sereth sat alone in the garden. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." "I should thank you," Dennis replied. "You gave me a chance when no one else would have. You stood up to your entire council for me." "I stood up for my children," Sereth corrected. "You were simply the tool they needed. But you became much more than that. You became family." Dennis felt tears sting his eyes. Family was not a word he expected to hear in an alien palace. "I still work maintenance shifts sometimes," he admitted. "I know I'm supposed to be all formal now with my fancy title, but I miss mopping floors and fixing things." Sereth laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "Then mop floors. Clean what you want. Your title is Royal Children's Companion, not Royal Prisoner. Be yourself. That is why my children love you." They sat together in comfortable silence, an ancient dragon queen and a human janitor who had accidentally changed an empire by simply being kind to two scared children. Above them, the palace lights glowed warm against the night sky. Inside those walls, Kiva and Ryan slept peacefully, their bellies full and their hearts happy. Sometimes the greatest revolutions start with the smallest acts. A game, a smile, a willingness to listen. And sometimes the janitor knows more than the king. That end of part 6.